Hello, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are joining from in the world. And welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Chat Show. This evening, I'm very, very honored to have as a guest Julie Coyle. Julie Coyle is from Ireland, and I met Julie online during the pandemic. And then I was lucky enough to meet Julie in person as well. But I'll tell you more about Julie in a moment. Welcome, Julie, to the Spiritual Chat Show.
Thank you, Fulvia. Very nice to be invited. Thank you very much. I can't believe it's the pandemic we own. I feel like I've known you a lot longer than that. But anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, we met. We met online on the SNUI.
Yeah,
and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Julie, and then we will dive into something really, really interesting actually. Julie, we lives in Ireland in County Meath, and since good evening everybody, good evening Lucinda, good evening Linda, and thank you for joining us. Since 2007, Julie has been interested in researching online family tree genealogy, and she built many family trees over the years. From 2009, she started her development as a psychic and as a medium. And in 2011, she became a member of the Spiritualist National Union International, the SUI, which is a branch of the SNU in the UK, where in 2018 she qualified as an accredited platform medium with the platform accreditation scheme, and then she continued, and she is a holder of a certificate with the SNUI certificate holder, completed in 2022.
I'll just interrupt there, Fulvia. I'm not actually an actual certificate holder. I have trained to certificate level, but I haven't actually. I'm not a certificate holder.
Okay.
But I'm trained to certificate level.
Okay, sorry, Julie.
In case we get into trouble for that.
No worries. In 2014, Julie founded the Spiritualist Center in Oldcastle in County Meath. Hello, Andrea. Thank you for joining us. Where she was holding, regularly spiritualist divine services once a month for over 7 years. She was having guest mediums from Ireland and from the UK. And she had also me as a guest medium, and I will always be grateful to Julie for giving me, for inviting me in her center.
It's great to
Um,
have you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Julie. Um, as a spiritual healer, as a spiritual medium, Julie teaches psychic and mediumship development classes, and both in person and online, and also she gives private readings. Her interest within the spiritualist movement lies in the awareness of the continued existence of the human soul after we leave the physical body. And Julie really believes that our life here on earth is the best lived life if self development, and developing ourselves, and also helping others. And this of course involves taking personal responsibilities for our thoughts, for our actions, for our deeds, which ultimately lead to a better world for all of us, and for future generations. Hello, Eileen. Thank you for joining us. Um, but this evening, Julie is here to talk about her book. Julie wrote this beautiful book about, it's a biography about the psychic medium Eileen Garrett. I am not going to say anything about it because Julie is the expert, and Julie will tell us about the book, about Eileen Garrett. For those of you who don't know about her, and it's a beautiful book. It's
Thank you, Fulvia.
compelling. It's compelling. I found it, Julie, like reading, a crime book, nearly, because things were
Mm.
unfolding and unfolding and
Yeah.
unfolding.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
I loved the way you structured the book. You divided the book in three parts, and there was a reason for that.
Mm.
But please, um, my first question for you, Julie, is why did you decide
Mm.
to write another biography about Eileen Garrett? Because there are already two, and one of which, she wrote her own biography.
Mm.
Why did you decide to write a
Yeah.
biography about her?
Thanks, Fulvia. And yeah, it's a good question, because that's actually what started the whole project. Um, and because when I actually was thinking about it, there is actually only two biographies and one memoir um,
Mm,
that were currently on the scene. And she wrote them herself, Eileen Garrett. And so she wrote her first autobiography. She wrote it was published in 1939, and it was called My Life as a Search for the Meaning of Mediumship. And that was her first one. And the second one was a memoir, and it was called I have to think, Adventures in the Supernormal. I have the book here. Some people might know that book a lot more, but from the cover of it. And that was her memoir. She published that 10 years later in 1949. And then in 1968, it was 2 years before she died, actually, it was later in life, there was a second autobiography published, and it was called Many Voices. Um,
mm,
and then she had a very good friend, Alan Angoff, who was a very good friend, personal friend of hers. And 4 years after she died, he brought out a biography in 1974. And um, so he brought that out in 1974. But so there was two biographies and a memoir. that were published by Eileen Garrett herself, and then her friend Alan Angoff brought out his biography in 1974. I think what was the name? There's so many books that were written.
And then you decide to write this one, which is it's more accurate biography.
Yeah. And that's the reason, because even Alan Angoff is in his book Eileen Garrett and the World Beyond the Senses. I feel she knew he was writing it. She probably knew a few years before. He might have been. He was working on it from about, I think, 1966, and I think he actually probably did come to Ireland, County Meath, and met her two cousins, her two first cousins, and he includes that in the book as well. So she would have had an inclination that he was doing that, and he brought that out in 1974. But he really rehashed everything that she had said in both her two biographies and her memoir. And so really it was a repeat really of everything. So I felt there was nothing fresh in it. But to answer your question, the reason I had wanted that, I thought about it and I thought, there was nothing that anybody else had written. And when I joined SNUI, and I joined SNUI, as you know, you're a member of SNUI as well, and we love the online platform. And that's because I live in Ireland, as you do yourself. We don't have the luxury of spiritualist churches as they would have in the UK. So we depended on, and are still depending on, the SNUI, the website, to go online and learn. And I started from 2011, and we would always have great chats, and everyone was very friendly in SNUI. And when I was learning, I was starting to look at psychic and mediumship development, and I'd be in classes. And I mean, there was people from all over the world. There were people, as you know, from the UK, from Ireland, from the United States, from Canada and Europe. And people get to know me because I was new, and they say, well, where are you from? And I'd say, well, I'm living in County Meath in Ireland. And then the next thing out of their mouths that they would say, oh my God, you know all about Eileen Garrett, then the famous psychic and medium. She was from the trance medium. She was from County Meath. You must know about her. And sure, I hadn't a clue. I knew nothing about this person, Eileen Garrett. I had never heard of any Irish medium. Mostly UK mediums, people we would have heard of as we were developing. Especially, we're learning about our pioneers, Estelle Roberts, Helen Hughes, Gordon Higginson, and later, you'd be hearing about those. Eileen Garrett, I was shocked to hear that there was an Irish woman called Eileen Garrett who was from County Meath. And County Meath is a 25-minute drive from where I live. That she was from the town of Navan, and that these people from all over the world knew all this. And they said, oh, she's from Bow Park. There's a town, a little area outside Navan called Bow Park. And I was shocked because they were telling me something I did not know. And so I decided, I had an interest in it, and I decided to have a look at her life, and that was where I became interested. And why, to answer your question, why I decided I would like to write about her was because nobody in Ireland knew about her, as I was Irish. I'm Irish, living in Ireland all my life, and never at any moment in my life, through TV or radio or through public library, did I ever come across any information on Eileen Garrett, the famous psychic and trans.
So nobody never spoke about her in Ireland.
Never, absolutely never. I know I'm living in Ireland. I know longer than you because you're Italian, so you started off in Italy. But I was born in Ireland, and so I can honestly say never. There was never a moment, and that's what intrigued me. That was initially the first thing that caught my attention. And I thought, well, why not? And obviously through learning about psychic and mediumship, and then becoming a spiritualist and learning spiritism, I wanted to play my part and highlight it in Ireland and let people know, look, we had this this psychic and this trance medium. And actually, do you know what? She was world famous, but we don't know
Yeah,
about her. How come we don't know? You know?
I knew about her.
Yeah, you knew better, and probably because, how did you know? Because probably you learned through your development. Would that be right? Would that be fair to say?
I came across
Hmm.
about her name mainly because for the trans mediumship.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's only those of us who are developing, and that's
yeah,
it. The only other mediums and psychics in Ireland that would have known about her would have been those of us who were developing, and then her name comes up. But other than that, we wouldn't know about her, and she was
yeah.
never in any newspapers or So that's, I felt I wanted to correct that, and I felt there's this woman, and she did a lot more than later in life than just the psychic and the trans mediumship. She went into other areas, and I thought, well, how come she was a famous, she was a very famous publisher in New York. She developed, she
Yeah, I
founded
read it.
the
I
Psychology
didn't know.
Foundation in 1951, and I thought, well, how come nobody knows that? They know all over the world that, but we didn't know in Ireland. And so that was where how I initially started off, that I took the bait, I suppose you can say. I got the bug, and that was it. That was my initial um, journey. I said I'd like to write about her. That was what I.
That's great, Julie. And you did. This is from comes from me. You did a great job.
Thank you, Fulvia.
I loved
Very
the book.
kind of you.
I
Thank you.
love it. I love it
Did you
absolutely.
finish it in the end?
Yes,
It's a
yes.
big read.
And n- Julie, you wrote Eileen's biography, researching and using your skills as, genealogist and a family tree researcher and
Yeah.
also as a medium.
Yeah, there was a help
And
for both. Yeah.
would you
Mm.
like tell us your experience?
Yeah, I felt and that came very handy, because I have always been interested in family tree history, and my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was English, and she died when I was very young, but I was very close to her, um, and in fact, she stayed with me all my life, and she was my father's mother, and she was from Birmingham in the UK. And she came over to Dublin. She married my grandfather. She met him in Birmingham. So she
Hmm.
was very proud of her British or English roots. She was very proud of being English. And she had a British passport as well. Um, and So I've always been interested in looking at my family tree, and I'm 20 years now researching, and over the years I have done hundreds of trees at this stage. I through my psychic and mediumship development, I also noticed that when I was doing the family tree history for both myself and for other people who asked me, um, I noticed that there was a healing taking place. And
Oh,
I do believe in healing through family tree genealogy. Now, not everybody would believe that. I know plenty of people who are family tree historians and genealogy, but they may not necessarily believe, oh, it creates a healing. But I know plenty of people who do, and there is known healing through family tree.
can
Um,
I ask you how the healing happens when you're doing the family tree?
Yeah, it's I find myself, it's very similar. It's funny, the two journeys, my psychic and mediumship development and my family tree development, the genealogy development, almost came parallel with one another. So you could say it was meant to happen, really. But really, when you look at family tree genealogy, what are you doing? Like you're wanting to know information about your family tree, your DNA, where you came from, the people who have gone before you. And many of us, we might know about we might know our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, but often we don't know anything other than, you know, further out than that. We wouldn't know maybe our great grandfathers, great grandmothers. And indeed, I've met many
Yeah.
people who don't even know who their grandparents are. I've met people, I've done trees for people, and they might have known the name of their grandmother, their grandfather, but they wouldn't have known anything else. They wouldn't have known what they did in their life, what happened in their younger life. You know, it's
I
amazing
see.
how we don't know, because so much of it, you might get some stories that are passed, and it depends on the family, I think. Some families are very good at handing down information and passing it on. And
Yeah.
other families are terrible at it, and they keep their mouths shut and they say nothing. And in other cases, they might pass wrong information, which is what happened in my case, the completely wrong information. And it's only when you sit and you do genealogy and you start to uncover the name of the person. You get a surname that you never knew, you didn't know existed. You find out about them, what they did, what occupation they did when they were younger, even, you know, and you find out where they lived, which
Ah,
might be a lot of people wouldn't have known that. Some people are from different countries. You know, you look at the United States, a lot of people travel to the United States, and they may not have known where they came from. So in my case, it was an unraveling, and it becomes, and it's the same with psychic and mediumship. I feel like when we're psychics and mediums and we're developing, and when we had the skill then to the development to be able to communicate with those who have passed the spirit world. We're uncovering. We're the middle person, if you like. We're the medium is the conduit, really, and we're finding out names and whether we have mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers. We're finding information, or hopefully we are. You know, we're passing information. We're learning about the essence of that person from the
I
spirit
see.
world, and it's very similar
I
to
see.
genealogy, because that's exactly what you're doing with genealogy. And so for me, it was a natural. I'm not saying everybody does that, obviously, but because I am a medium, I found that both of them just naturally blended with one another.
I
Um,
see.
yeah, and you know that's for me, and it does create. It does, in my case, it certainly creates a healing, because you find out. You know, you can find out about the people who have gone before you, even aunts, uncles, great aunts, great uncles, great grandparents, and some of them, you know, you find they suffered a lot, or you know, like I found out recently, even before Christmas, that my great grandmother from Tala in County Dublin, that she was actually, her mother and father had to go into the workhouse in Dublin in the mid 1800s when my great grandmother was only 8, and they suffered, you know, and nobody taught me that, obviously, because that information is going way back and it wouldn't have been carried down. But with genealogy and family tree history, we have the ability to go back in through the senses and literally find information that could never have been passed out to us.
And
So it's amazing
that's
to do it.
great.
Yeah.
There's a question. I don't know. Can you see the comments, Julie,
Have you
there?
heard, and thank you, Darren, it's Darren for the question. Have you heard of the Donovan tribe? I'll have to say, no, I didn't. I haven't heard of the Donovan tribe. I know the name Donovan.
And then there's T.S. Smith. I'm uncovering a lot of shocks in
Shucks.
my family tree of both mother and father's side in Ireland,
And,
and all the illegal baby adoptions that took place with
yeah,
fake paperwork. It's a
it's a
bomb
bomb.
that's going to explode.
There'll be several bombs going off, I can tell you, Darren. Or this is T Smith. Yeah, it does. And I mean, every family is different, obviously. And I know this is what happens when you talk about genealogy now. You get sidetracked. I know we want to talk about the biography, but both subjects are very fascinating. Eileen Garrett's subject was fascinating, and the family tree genealogy. But yeah, no, everybody's story is different, and you know, especially particularly if someone who was adopted, or like T. Smith is there saying, yeah, it is. You do get shocked. But like that with Eileen Garrett, when I
But
was
with Eileen Garrett, we get a
yeah,
lot of surprises as well, and
well,
now we get there.
I started off perfectly, you know, innocent. I was so intrigued and started off, knew that I could do her tree and wanted to start off. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to do her tree? And I'll start off and then I'll write about it and I'll develop it from there. But what shocked me, and I see that the word shock is there because that can often happen. And when I was researching Eileen Garrett, it did happen because if you look at Wikipedia, and also for anyone, I mean, some of your viewers may not have read her biographies, but before I started off, I would have read her. I looked at Wikipedia, which will tell you, all based, of course, on Eileen Garrett's biographies. The very first one was the 1939 one, My Life as a as a what's it called? I'm always My Life as a meaning as a development. What's it called? I'm a bit nervous.
No worries.
As a search for the meaning of mediumship.
This is a safe space.
I know.
This is a relaxed.
Oh no, it is. It's very
space. No worries.
But there's so much information. That's the thing, and there's so many books that Eileen. She was a prolific writer, and I often have to think, what was the name of that book? What did she write? Because she wrote so many books. But the two biographies and the memoir, the first one was in 1939, and in that 1939 biography, she states that she said she gives some information that when I checked it was correct, but then she gave other information that was completely false. For example, she does say that her mother was Anne Brownell from County Meath, from Stackallan in County Meath, which is a little village not too far from Navan. And then she says, and she was a Protestant. She'll tell you her mother, Anne Brownell, was from the Protestant religion. She then tells you then that her father was a Spanish man from the Catholic religion called Anthony Vancho. And she says that both her parents commit suicide when she was 2 weeks old because her mother's family, the Brownells, wouldn't allow them to be together because it was a mixed, they wouldn't allow a Catholic and a Protestant have a mixed marriage. And so both parents were so distraught that her father, Anthony Vancho, became so distraught that he shot himself in the head with his pistol in his solicitor's office in Dublin, and that her mother was so distraught that she drowned herself in the well at their home in Bow Park, or where somewhere, not Bow Park, but the home in where she doesn't actually say where it is, but that their home in County Meath where they shared, and the baby Eileen was orphaned. And if you go on Wikipedia, that's exactly what it will tell you, or what it told me up until 2018 when I started to research.
But you discovered a different and the reality of things.
And that's where the shock, I see one of our viewers wrote, he got a shock, and that's what happens when it can happen. I'm not saying it does happen, but it can happen. You can be shocked when you start to look at, somebody gives you information and you find out that's not true. And that's what happened to me with Eileen Garrett. I was absolutely shocked. I thought, this woman is a world famous psychic medium, that she's famous all over the world, and yet the information that she gave in her book, starting with her first autobiography, and which she continued, she copied it more or less the whole time. She continued to rehash the same information. And even in 1974, Alan Angoff's biography, he rehashed the same information, but the information was not correct. There's some information that you might get one truth. For example, there is one part where she says that her mother commits suicide by drowning herself in the well in her home in County Meath. There is one part of that that's correct, and which I write about at the beginning of the book when I do the family tree. Her mother did drown, but it wasn't by suicide. It was an accident. And her mother actually suffered with epilepsy, and she would have been at her home, at the home in County Meath, which I discovered where that home was, where that cottage, and that's
because
amazing.
the
Yeah,
book is also full of photographies of of the places,
yeah,
family photographs and documents. So
yes, yeah,
the book is backed up by
yeah,
evidence, well backed up by
yeah.
evidence.
And it had to be that way, Fulvia. And you introduced it very well. You said it was very like a detective series, and that's the way I had to approach it. Because I was thinking, how am I going? How will I do this? How do we take this world famous woman? And here I am now saying that's not true. You know, her early, it's her early story, and also her early London story, which I said was a fabrication,
Yeah,
and some
it
cases
seems
fictional.
like,
Yeah,
when she
um,
moved to London, feels like she wanted um, to appear that she belonged to a higher class.
yeah, yeah. And again, I had to do the family tree first, and I mean, I researched the family tree. I mean, Eileen, she stated that her name was, her father was Anthony Vancho. There's no such man. It's not a marriage of an Irish woman and a Spanish man. Her parents were both Irish, and they were both Protestant. And her father was a man called James Savage. And in fact, she was born Emily Jane Savage on the
Yeah.
14th of March 1892, and she stated in her books that her name was Eileen. Eileen, well, we'd say Vancho. You'll see it, Eileen Vancho Little, and that her birth date was the 17th of March, 1893.
Yes, and
And
this is
that could not
strange.
possibly have happened
Yeah,
because her
she
mother actually
changed.
died in 1892. Yeah,
Yeah,
she changed her
and
date of birth.
the date of birth, she modified her last name as well.
Yes. Well,
Um,
that was more understandable. The name Little, that was understandable because she says in the books, in her memoir 1939, she starts off saying that she was reared by her aunt Martha and her uncle William Little in Bow Park in Navan, and that's true. I when I did the research, but she changed her name is written as Lyttle. In actual fact, William and Martha Little, it's Little.
yeah,
But I mean, that's understandable. She went to London. Um, she said she went at a very young age, at 15. I actually believe she did not go until till she was 18, which would have been about 1910. And it's understandable, I suppose. She changed her name maybe to make it a bit more glamorous looking. She changed it from Little to Lyttle, which I can maybe understand that, but I don't understand why a young woman would have changed her name to Eileen Jeanette, because she was known as Jane Savage with her aunt and uncle, and she was on the 1901 census as Jane Savage, and she was I think she was 9 years of age at that, or 8 years of age at that time. And
yes, and
but she then became, because she was reared in Bow Park in the family home. It was a small cottage. It was a thatched cottage with her aunt and uncle, um, Martha and William Little.
yeah,
She then became known as Jean, which was, it often happened in Ireland. The name could change from Jane to Jean, and she became known as Jean Little, which was understandable. That happens a lot, where
I
you'll get
see.
other children that are brought up in other families. They take on that second name, but
And then
she changed her name.
there's, yeah,
She completely changed her identity. Um,
exactly, and
yeah,
also she gave a different story about her life. Like she had three children, three marriages.
yeah,
Um,
shocking. Yeah, that shocked
it's a
me. Yeah,
lot. It's a
yeah,
lot actually.
that shocked me as well. That was that's this, when she gets to London, she talks about
Yeah.
how she had to go to London because her aunt had to send her away, because she had lost. She talks about her cousin Anne, her older cousin Anne, in Bow Park it's actually near Bow Park House. It's actually an area called Dollarstown, but it's Bow Park, or Yellowford as it's also known as in the area. But she had two cousins who died of TB, and TB was quite rampant at the time in Ireland. It was the biggest killer was really TB, tuberculosis. And Eileen Garrett herself, she did get she was very susceptible to chest infections, and I believe she said her aunt had to send her away to a cousin in London. But I found all of that to be untrue. She said that she married very young this Clive Barry, and that she had 3 infant sons, which was very shocking. I mean, when I came to that part, I just couldn't. I'd already been shocked about that her father was not a Spanish man called Anthony Vancho. But then the very shocking part was that she said she bore him 3 sons, and she lost 2 infant babies, and one of them she lost 2 infants within 5 months of one another, and then the third boy, they were boys, and then the third boy a year later, and he died after a week, and then her daughter, she said Eileen, was born. Now she doesn't give any dates, but I was able to go in and pick out the documentation, and I discovered that her daughter Eileen Little, who she called was called Eileen Little, Lyttle. She was born on the 6th of April 1916 during World War One.
Yeah.
But the thing
from a relationship.
Yeah, but what I discovered was that Clive Barry, she was not married. There was no such person.
No, they were not married. No.
And her second marriage, she said she married second then to another a soldier called Garth Wilcox. That's also made up. And the third man, she said, was James William Garrett, and that she married him. She didn't marry him, but she was cohabitating with him. And I found out that James William Garrett was the real person. And I actually have his tree done in the book as well. I actually went into his tree. But it was very shocking for me to find out that she did not give birth to 3 infant boys, and then
just
died.
One daughter.
And she did not marry a man called Clive Barry. In actual fact, in her 1939 autobiography, she actually devotes 9 chapters, or is it 7 or 9? I think it's 7, maybe 7 chapters to meeting Clive Barry, marrying Clive Barry. She talks about how that she always thought, she likes to always portray that she came from, that he was from, he had built a house in London, and that she had servants. I mean, none of that was true. Actually, what I discovered was on the 1911 census, the UK census, which was the 2nd of April 1911.
Yeah.
Eileen Garrett, I was shocked to find she's on the census. She's 19 years of age, and she's a domestic servant.
Yeah.
And she's working for a couple essentially in London as the domestic servant. And at that point, she should have been married to a Clive Barry and had a couple of these little boys, 1 or 2 of these little boys that she said she had. But of course, it's all made up. But that's the shock. And the shock as well is that she describes these boys in, I don't know if maybe somebody that's listening has actually read the books. But when you're actually reading it, I read them and I didn't know that it wasn't true. And when you read it, like, you do feel so sorry for, because I've lost an infant child. I lost a baby full term. He died a few days before he was due. And it is the most devastating and traumatic thing you could ever go through for anyone who's lost a child. And then here's Eileen, and she makes it up, and she says she lost 3 of them, infants. And it's not true. None of it is true. But what I actually discovered then, because I'd done the family trees, see, once I started with the family trees, and once you start with family trees and genealogy, you've got the facts. You have the facts in front of you. You have the documents. You can look, there's other sites you can get. You can use the census. Then if you can get birth records, you can get death records, you get marriage records. There's other things you can do. And I did that. And so I had the paperwork in front of me. But the most unbelievable part of it was that it was her Aunt Martha that lost 3 infants. She lost the 3 babies. So Eileen knew that bit of information. So that I began to understand Eileen. It took me, like, I was doing it over 5 years. I began to, not immediately, but after a few years, I then began to get a picture of how she was, where she was getting her information. So there was information that she knew, and then she would take that piece of information and she would twist it, and she
Yeah.
would turn it into her life.
Have you ever wondered?
That, and she did the same with her mother. Like, her mother did drown. She was only 37 years of age, Mrs. Anne Savage. She was the younger sister of Eileen's Aunt Martha. Martha was the eldest child, and Eileen Garrett says she was the eldest child, and that was correct. So that piece of information is correct. So it was quite complicated, but some information was correct, but some of it was completely a lie. It was not true.
Okay.
It was a fabrication. And so even her mother, she did die by drowning, and it was in the family cottage it was called Nocumra Woods, which is now known as Balrath Woods in Kentstown, which is just outside Meath. And it was the cottage that was there. Her father had been a gamekeeper, and her grandfather had been a gamekeeper as well, working for the very wealthy Somerville Lord at Lumley. On the Somerville estate. And Anne Savage, Eileen Garrett, it turns out, was not an only child. She was the youngest child of 8 children that were born to James Savage and Anne Brownell Savage. One little boy, James, had died in 1881. He was only a few days old. So when Emily Jane Savage, Eileen Garrett, when she was born on the 14th of March, 1892, she was actually the youngest of 8 children. She was not an only child. So she had brothers and sisters living in that cottage. And her mother would have been fetching water from the well. And we know from the Griffiths valuation, the Irish Griffiths valuation, which is about 1854, it's actually on the map. The cottage is on the map on the edge of the forest. And you can actually see that it was recorded that there was a garden there as well. And Eileen Garrett, in her biography, or her autobiography in 1939, she says that her mother's body was carried from the garden, that she had she'd taken her own life. But what she had done was she obviously was an epileptic. And there's another piece of information we have in family tree history, that her mother was an epileptic. And that would be interesting for people who were related by DNA to actually know that. So she obviously was going to the well, and Eileen, she must have been in the cottage. She must have been in the house. She was only about 2 weeks. She said she was 2 weeks old. She actually wasn't. She was 7 months old when her mother died. So we can take it that Eileen must have been there. She was in the cottage at 7 months old. Her mother went. The other children would have gone to school. Her mother, Anne, would have gone to the well, which would have been nearby, looking to get the water. And she would have suffered an epileptic fit. And what happened was she would have literally just gone unconscious. And because she was near the water, again, I don't know where the well is, but it may have been an open well. We just don't know. But she would have lost consciousness and she would have collapsed down. And actually, her death was by drowning. Whilst having
Julie, can I just interject there? Have you ever wondered why she made up her life?
I've wondered. I've spent the last 5 years.
Did you find out why she made up her life?
Yeah. And that's something, like, if you read the book, that's something I do address, and towards the end.
Yeah, but let's tell us.
Yeah, I do address it, and I try to understand her, even though I was quite angry, quite shocked about it. But then I try to understand, well, why did she do it? And my belief is that she made up the stories because at that stage, 1939, Eileen Garrett had written her personal autobiography. And at that point in her life, she was a world-famous psychic and trance medium at that stage. And she was mixing with very affluent people. both in the spiritualist societies and with other people. She was, she had known Arthur Conan Doyle, and previous to that, he had been the, he many of your people might know him as he was the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, but he was also the president of the London Spiritist Alliance. He was a strong spiritist. So she was mixing with people in high society, really, if you want to use that word. And I believe that she just didn't want people to know about her poor background in Ireland, and that she didn't want people also to know that her daughter was born out of wedlock, because Eileen was not married in 1916 in London when her daughter Eileen was born. And I do believe that he very likely was a British soldier that was training when she was working in the tea rooms on Heath Street in London, which is near the Heath in Hampstead, and the soldiers. The Hampstead soldiers would train there, and I believe it's one of those soldiers. So I do believe he was very likely killed in the war. So she touches on some truths and some untruths, but that's why I believe she didn't want people to know that.
I see.
Rather than tell the truth, which, again, but I mean, that I've often come across that. I have an uncle who did the same thing. I mean, you might ask, well, why do people do that? I have an uncle who was born in Dublin, and he married an English woman, and he was fluent in Norwegian, because he was working, he went to the Norwegian Navy, and he made up a story as well. So people do that. It's not unusual. People do it. And in this case, Eileen Garrett also did it. But what I feel is, once you start to do that, once you start it, it's very hard to then to go back. Once you start to go down that road and you meet people and you give them the same story, it's very hard to then go back and say, well, actually, I made that all up. Sometimes sometimes you believe it yourself. If you tell the story so many times, you then start to believe the story yourself, and which is what I believe happened to her.
As you said, when she became famous, she mixed with important figures like scientists and researcher. And for example, James Mackenzie of the British College of Psychic Science in London. I think he was the first one she collaborated with.
He was, yeah. She started off. She would have been very psychic, but you're right. He was the first one, James Hewitt Mackenzie, and he was known as Hewitt. They called him Hewitt. And his wife Barbara, they had set up the London Spiritist Alliance. So she was introduced to Hewitt Mackenzie through Barbara. She'd become friends with Barbara. Eileen Garrett initially started sitting in a development circle. And what happened with Eileen was there were other women in the circle, and she just started sitting. But she immediately, she had the ability. She immediately went into a deep trance, and she frightened the people in the circle. They got a fright because she started speaking. The spirit world started communicating through her, and then they would start speaking to the other people in the room, and they got a bit of a shock because she was a very deep trance medium, but didn't realize that. So this is why then she came under the wings of Hewitt Mackenzie. He was very interested in her deep trance medium. He had another medium as well that he was training at the time, was Gladys Osborne Leonard.
Yeah.
She was quite well known as well. She was a deep trance medium, and he worked with her as well. But he started initially working with Eileen, and she was very fond of him. She really liked him, and she trusted him.
Eileen Garrett, actually, what I found out when I when I came across her, it was that she was the most researched trans medium. Is that correct, Julie?
How do you mean the most researched? You mean
When they were conducting you know
experiment?
not experiment to see if she was genuinely, or she was a genuine medium
Yeah,
or not.
yeah.
um
Well,
and
she
there,
was, and I mean that was Eileen herself, and I think it's important to make a comment at this stage that Eileen, she was not a spiritualist. She didn't go the spiritualist route, and she didn't, even though James Hewitt Mackenzie was a spiritualist, his wife Barbara, and all the people that she initially trained with were spiritualists, but she herself, she didn't want to go down that route because she had a problem. Her main spirit guide was Giovanni, and he would come through first in deep trance, and he would speak to the people present and bring through those from spirit. And when she was in deep trance, and then of course she'd come out of her trance and she wouldn't remember any of it. That's the very deep trance mediumship. But it is important to know that to say about Eileen that she struggled with that part of it. She struggled with the idea of spirit guides, and she
she
struggled.
always
Yeah,
doubted
she
about
did.
her trans
Yeah,
mediumship.
she doubted it in that she knew that this was happening, but then she wasn't. She really felt not a part of it um, because with the nature of deep trance mediumship, she was, if you like, she was unconscious. She wasn't aware. And then I suppose Estelle Roberts would have done the same. When Estelle Roberts would come out of her trance, she actually nearly had to ask, or she had to ask in the circle what happened, and so it's kind of, in a way, the medium doesn't really get to the excitement of it. I suppose everyone else is excited listening in the deep trance circle, but the medium themselves has stepped back and allowed the spirit world to entrance them, to take over.
Anyway,
So she wasn't a spiritualist, but she did struggle with the idea of she wasn't happy with the fact that she didn't really believe the spirit guides were there, and that's what sent her on the parapsychology route. She wanted a more scientific explanation from those experts in the field that were trained in science, and she actually, yeah, she probably was the most trained medium, in that she invited them to come and work with her. And it's
because
in the book. I mean, that I don't want to give too much away. There's a lot in it. But the book,
she founded a center for research as well in America.
she did, and I mean, she has to be commended for what she did. And she came over to New York in 1940, I think it was 1939. She was lucky to get out, because the Second World War had started, and she was in France at that time. But she had been coming back and forward since the seance. I suppose we haven't mentioned what actually propelled Eileen Garrett onto the world stage. She
in
had been in
1930.
London, was the R101 airship disaster, which had happened in 1930. So she had become famous on the world stage since then, because it was known worldwide that she was the medium, and that she was then invited to New York by the American Society for Psychical Research. And that's how she started going back and forth to New York from London. But she had been, for your viewers, for those who don't know, she'd been very well known in London, and a lot of people around England as well at the time would have travelled to the London Spiritualist Alliance looking for readings. And then she was contacted. She knew Harry Price. Harry Price at the time was a well-known psychic researcher as well, and
Yes.
his mission he would make it his mission. He would try to debunk the mediums, but
Yeah.
very well. He respected Eileen Garrett. He genuinely believed Eileen Garrett's was a real. It was her mediumship. He genuinely believed her. He. What happened was then the R101 seance. It's called the R101 airship seance.
Yeah.
He had Eileen Arthur Conan Doyle, as I said previously. He had been the president of the London Spiritist Alliance, which at that time was at 16 Queensberry Place in South Kensington in London, and he was the he died in 1930, but he also had known Eileen, and he'd known her very well, and like that Arthur Conan Doyle held her in great respect as well. And she was very professional. When people went to her, because she had been trained by Hewitt Mackenzie, and she was very professional, and she gave very good readings, and people came to her from all over the UK. But Arthur Conan Doyle died on the 7th of July 1930. He was only 59 years of age. And so Harry Price then, on the 7th of October 1930, he had arranged with Eileen for her to be the medium. He wanted to have a seance. Now, obviously, he didn't tell Eileen Garrett what this was about, because he couldn't tell her, obviously. But he wanted to see, would Arthur Conan Doyle come through Eileen's mediumship, through the trance. It was 3 months after his passing. And so he had arranged with Eileen. They met in Harry Price's National Laboratory for Psychical Research, which it had been the top floor of the London Spiritist Alliance at the time. That is now the College of Psychic Science, isn't it? It still is at 16 Queensberry Place. It's the College of Psychic Science now, but it was the Spiritist Alliance at the time. And so Eileen, that was fine. She went along. His friend was there, Ian Costner, I think his name was. He was a journalist and a writer. He was there, and also Harry Price's secretary was there, and she was a very loyal secretary to him, and she used her Pitman shorthand to record what was happening. Unknown, what happened was 2 days previously, the British aviation they had a British dirigible, large, the air balloons like this.
Yes.
And they had come first from Germany. The Germans had the prototype first, and the British wanted to have their own as well. They didn't want to be left behind in the race for these air dirigibles, these airships. So they had an R101, and they had been working on that for a few years before that. And they launched their, I think it was on, I have it written down because I do tend to sometimes forget that. It was, the 4th of October 1930, the R101 left her moorings in, where was it? Cardington in Bedford, and she was en route to Karachi in India. And I mean, there was many. How many people? There was 48 people on board. 48 people on board, and that died in the crash anyway. And 6 people survived, but there was dignitaries in it. There was the minister. There was Lord Thompson, the Minister for Air, and Sir Sefton Branker was the Air Vice Marshal, and they took off because it was the maiden flight. So you had these dignitaries on board.
And then what happened?
And then the very next day, then there was a storm. They were heading to. It was coming towards Paris, and there was an electrical storm, and the dirigible crashed, and it went into a ball of flames, and the 48 people were killed. And then 2 days later, it wasn't actually reported on. Don't forget, then they didn't have. They were relying on newspaper and radio reports at the time. They didn't have the internet that we have now. So she had been on the. It was the 7th of October. She was in the séance, and 2 days after the crash, the captain of the airship, H. Carmichael Irwin, came through Eileen's mediumship. So Harry Price was hoping that Arthur Conan Doyle would come through, and
Instead,
the
he
captain came
was.
through, and he gave information of who he was, and that the airship had gone down. He said it had been unsafe, that there was a problem with the hydrogen and the electricals, and it was unsafe, and it wasn't going to work. And he gave that information. And Eileen Garrett could never have known. She couldn't have known any of that information. And that's what happened. That information came out, and she was propelled onto the world stage, if you like, and because it was actually confirmed by the Royal Air Force. They did confirm that some information that she gave, that was shocking. She couldn't have known. There was technical information that she gave, and the name of the captain as well. She couldn't have known that. He gave his name.
I see.
And so
then
that's what
she
happened.
was invited. How her life changed?
Yeah, changed. And she ended up in New York then, and she started. She published. I mean, she was one of the first women to publish. The publishing agency, which was in 1939, was Creative Age Press, and she actually started writing. That's where she wrote many of her own books, Awareness, Telepathy. A lot of her other books were printed through Creative Age Press, and she handled books for other people, some Irish people as well at the time living in New York. And then in 1951, she founded the Parapsychology Foundation with her. She had a very good friend, a very wealthy friend, and she founded the Parapsychology Foundation. So she was very, she did quite a lot of things in her life. But my book is, it's very complicated. It's even complicated to talk about it. It was complicated to write about it, but it's complicated to talk about it because you end up talking about so many other facets. She was a complicated person.
That's what makes your book so compelling.
Yeah. But my book, it really concentrates on her early life, and I don't touch on how her fabrications, like how would they have affected our perception of her mediumship. I leave that up to the reader. I don't say. I do believe there's some, the fact that she didn't tell the truth, and that she did make up stories, and that she would have known the truth. There's no doubt she knew her mother had drowned. She knew her father was James Savage. There's no doubt she knew her name was Jane Savage. Because she was in school. We have information from the school, from the national school. Her name is on the register. She knew what her name was. She knew her name was Jane Savage. It's not just that she wasn't told that. She knew that.
How long did it take for you from start to finish? How long did it take?
It took a long time. There's 5 years research gone into it. So quite 5 years, and 5 years is a long time, because there's many family trees. There's 3 family trees, and there's the three Irish family trees, and then also James William Garrett's family tree. And then I had to go back and check, and then I had to keep checking her 2 autobiographies, because her story changes as well. But I had to keep checking, and there was documentation that was being uncovered. And then I don't want to give too much away, but I was quite shocked as well. There's another, towards the end of her life, I found another document online, and it's how she passed.
This is my next question, actually.
Yeah.
Was it difficult for you to find the documentation about her, certificates and addresses, and was it complicated? Because I see even the photographs, the book, for those who are listening now, or will be watching, possibly watching in a second moment. The book is really, there are many photographs of
Yeah,
Eileen's brother, and where she lived, and the photocopy of the certificates. So
yeah,
um, I when I was reading it, I was, oh my gosh, this is was a tremendous work to
mm,
do, and I was always wondering, was it difficult to track down all documentation and
um, I wouldn't say it wasn't difficult in the sense that I followed her story. So while it didn't all happen at once, you can imagine I didn't get all the documentation at once, but I started from the beginning, which is what you would do when you're researching a family tree. You'd start off with the birth, you'd look at the family tree, look at all the other births and deaths and marriages, and then I moved on, and I would have worked off of her autobiographies, and that's and everything just unfolds, which is how it does unfold if you're when you're carrying a family tree genealogy, and it doesn't all unfold within the first week. It takes time, um, and also one of the main and really a very pivotal moment was the 1921 census, which there is a 100-year privacy ruling, um, that in the UK and Ireland, that census which has taken place, it's not released for 100 years, and they do that to protect the privacy of anyone who's 90 to 100, who's lived within that time frame, so that people's privacy is not people don't get offended, that you don't reveal people's private life. So they wait for 100 years, and so, for example, I really needed to get hold of the 1921 census, because I knew she would have had to be with James William Garrett around that time if she said she was, and whether he was a real person. And as it turned out, I didn't actually get that. Wasn't actually released in the UK until the 7th of January 2022.
I
So,
see.
and that was
So
amazing.
you had to
So,
wait for
but it
that.
was all an unfoldment. It all becomes, prior to that, I had started at the beginning, and then by the time I got to the release of the 1921 census, there was one part of it which was absolutely incredible to me, because she was living with James William Garrett in Cartwright Gardens, she had said. Now, Alan Angoff, he writes in his 1974 biography that she had opened a hostel in Cartwright Gardens. In actual fact, it was 18 Cartwright Gardens in 1921, and it was James William Garrett's hotel, which they call them hotels, but if you look at Cartwright Gardens, it's a lovely kind of a street in London, and a lot of them are like these bed and breakfast, what we'd call a bed and breakfast, but that they would have called hotels in them days, and
I
they were
see.
all a street of them. And he was retired from the army, and he was the proprietor, but she was living with him, and they were pretending to be husband and wife, but they weren't actually married.
But
But
then she took his last name.
she then, but in actual fact, he puts her name in the census, and he calls her Eileen J. Garrett, and he did call her that in the census. So they were working in the hotel, and they were pretending to be married, and she kept his name then, but he did write her name in the census. But that the pivotal moment for me was, there was a part of the 1921 census where they asked where you were born, and he said he was born in Somerstown in London, and I was able to get his records from that, and realize, yeah, this is him, that's who he is. But what he put down for Eileen Garrett was that she was born at Somerville in
As well.
County Meath. And Somerville is the estate, the actual, the Balrath Woods, the Knockcumra Woods. And that's where the cottage is. She was born on the Somerville estate. And it proved that she knew that. In 1921, she knew that. She knew that she was born there. But it appears nowhere. And it was only in my research that the word Somerville came up. But in 2022, when I seen that, the only other person who wrote that down was James William Garrett. And
I
how did he write
see.
it down? Because he knew, because she told him. She told him she was born at Somerville. And he was very meticulous, James William Garrett. It was great because he was a very good writer, and he was very meticulous. And he wrote down where she was born, which was correct. It was the Somerville estate. She was born on that estate, which she knew, because he couldn't have known if he had said Bow Park or Navan. It wouldn't have been a pivotal moment. But the pivotal moment was when he said she was born at Somerville. And that proved to me that she knew where she was born. So it was really a journey. It really closed it off for me, even though that was 2022 and the book still wasn't published until June in 2024. I still had work to do on it. But that was another shocking moment that brought it home to me that Eileen knew. She knew the information, and her autobiography, she was telling the public a different story. But in her private life, she told, she was in a relationship, possibly with James William Garrett at the time. She was possibly in a relationship with him as well. But she told him where she was from, and he wrote it. Imagine that, he wrote it on the census in 1920.
Yeah,
And
no, and it's also surprising that maybe he was the only person she told where she was really born.
yeah, well, it's surprising and not, because that was in 1921, and she started developing in around 1925 to 1926, and she was split up with James William Garrett at that stage. And then she started moving into the development groups and meeting the spiritualists. And then I feel she didn't tell anyone from then on. But privately, before she started developing, he already knew, James William Garrett. She said that he didn't like her going down that route, and she said that she said she was married, and that's why they got a divorce. But she wouldn't have been married to him at all.
She never married in her life.
She did not marry. There are no marriage records whatsoever. My belief is she never married. She didn't marry. Yeah. But James William Garrett was a real person, and I dedicate the second part of the book to him. And the first part.
And her daughter lived with her, and it's surprising because she named their daughter with the same name.
Yeah, she did. She did. She
She
called her daughter Eileen Little. Yeah, Lyttle. Yeah, yeah.
Have you found if there's still any relative alive of Eileen Garrett?
Of her siblings, I haven't come across any of them, and I would know. She had an older brother who was in, I think it was Newcastle upon Tyne. So anyone listening from around there, but the name Savage, certainly her brother would have been Robert Savage. He certainly had a family there, and so she has some siblings. So there are people in the UK, especially in England, who would be related to her through DNA. And then her other siblings emigrated to Hastings in Canada. So there would be people in Canada who would have the DNA as well. But I suppose the story is lost. A lot of people, they don't associate Emily Jane Savage and Jean Little and Eileen J. Garrett as the same person.
Yeah.
So people just don't know that, but hopefully that's what my book has highlighted. And that was what it's just a search for the truth. That's what I say on it. I appreciate it's a very controversial as well. I mean, some people mightn't like the idea mightn't like it, but I mean, I think there are a lot of people who will like it. And I do
Yeah,
feel it's better to know the truth, as you said in your introduction, Fulvia, very well. You talked about the mediumship, and we as developing mediums, and when you were introducing me as well, I really believe it's all about self-development, and we have to face our shadow self, our dark. We all have. Everybody has
yeah,
a dark side of it. We're not saints, we're human beings on a spiritual journey. Therefore, there's black and there's white. There's light and there's dark, and we must face our dark side. And I believe with Eileen, the sad part for me was I don't believe she ever did. She didn't turn and look at it, because I mean, we know we're mediums, and we know if we want to work as mediums, we must look at
yes,
our trauma. We must look at our dark
yes,
past, things we've done wrong. If we've wronged anybody, we have to look at it, and we have to see where we went wrong, or where other people, we have to look at other situations where we were wronged, and we have to understand that, because we can't work with the spirit world if we don't have that understanding and that compassion. But that's where we develop. It creates a progression. We progress on through life. And I just feel the sad part with Eileen is that she, with the mediumship, and also, I don't want to give the book away, but it's a sad part
no,
at the
please.
end, and there's a dark
No,
part.
because I was talking with Julie yesterday, and she told me,
I know, I'm sorry for bursting your
no
bubble.
worries, no worries.
I kind of
It's
had to
okay.
say it to you because we were talking about it today, but still, it's still poignant when you read it. I didn't.
Yes, it is.
There is a document
Yeah.
that, so I said to you to look at the document, which I found it was hidden in plain sight on Ancestry. It wasn't that but it was shocking. But I found that sad, that she was such a brilliant trance medium, and brilliant in other ways too, but that she didn't trust it enough. I feel she my own personal experience, like, this is my own personal opinion, had she gone the spiritualist route, um, she would have self-developed. That's my opinion now, and I know that people may not agree, but that is my opinion, because with spiritualism, you're forced to self-develop, because if you
Yeah,
want to
you
grow,
have
you
to.
have
You
to,
have to.
and you have to look at your shadow self. And I
Yeah.
believe she didn't. But that's fine. Eileen still did fantastic things in her life, and she was very well
Yeah,
loved.
absolutely.
You
She
know,
was a
yeah.
very intelligent
Oh,
woman.
very, very intelligent. Yeah,
And
yeah.
in America and in England, she did
Mm,
great
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Um, she founded, she was an editor. She became an editor, and then
Oh,
she
yeah.
founded the Sarah, Sarah
Parapsychology.
parapsychology
Yeah, yeah.
society
Yeah, and I
in
mean
America.
they still do great work today. And at the time, like in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, it was a very new area, and they developed. They were giving out grants for people who wanted to work. There was psychotherapists, and
Yeah.
working in the area, and there was great development that
And
was done. Yeah.
oftentimes she offered herself as,
Mm,
to be,
she did.
to be like the person,
She
she
did.
offered to be the one to be researched
Yeah, she did,
on.
and that's well documented. What's not documented is the early life.
Yeah.
Her later life is from the time she got to New York, and from the time she's from about 1925 is documented. But that was the difference with this book, is it's information that has never been known before. And I was actually interested to see, the Wikipedia pages. There is somebody who's running the page on Eileen Garrett. I noticed that she, whoever it is, has included my research as well.
Oh, that's
Um,
great, Julie. That's great.
so it's nice to know. It's known as a research book as well,
It is.
for anyone
It
who wants
is.
to look at her life and develop more. Um, That's it.
And I guess your book now is like another um, links with the as a chain with the other books.
Yeah.
So
Can I just
there's
say, Fulvia, just before, I know we've kind of probably gone over the time, but for anyone who wants to buy the book, particularly if you live in Ireland and Northern Ireland, you can get there's a good premium copybooks that I have here, and I'll sign it for you as well. But if you go on the website buythebook.ie, you can order the book there, and I'll post it to you in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And then for anyone else around the world, it's available all over the Amazon websites, Amazon UK, Amazon USA, Amazon.com, and all the other
.ie,
sites.
.ie
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, Amazon with the new Irish Amazon only came out at Christmas, did it? Amazon.ie
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
it's available there as well. Okay, we are at the end of this episode, and Julie, thank you very much to come in and to share your your knowledge, and it was really great listening to
Thank
you and listening about the research and the book.
thank you.
And I strongly recommend for those who are interested to get the book, because um, it's really worth it. It's really worth it
Thanks
reading.
very much, Fulvia.
And
Thank you for inviting me.
no, thank you to you, Julie.
Great to
Thank you
see you
very
again. Yeah,
much. It
thank you.
was a it
Yeah,
was a really a pleasure.
yeah.
And I'll see you all. I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time with a new guest. And as usual, um, I'll uh, I'll keep a little bit of secrecy. A new guest with a new subject to talk about. And I hope you enjoyed like I did this evening with Julie. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time. Take care, everybody, and
Thank you,
thank
everyone.
you. Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Julie. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye bye.